Welcome back. The details. Egypt celebrates on March 19th a dear anniversary for all Egyptians. That's the 33rd anniversary for the liberation of Taba and hoisting of the Egyptian flag high over it.
March 19th marks a powerful historic moment in modern Egypt as Egyptian sovereignty was restored from Israel over Taba city in South Sinai. Despite being a small city in the region, the story of Taba's return to Egypt remains pivotal in Egyptian-Israeli relations. Taba's liberation sends a strong message to the world that Egypt is able to use all means to protect its land and dignity, whether through armed means, as in the War of Attrition and the 1973 October War, or through political and diplomatic actions during the Egypt-Israeli separation of forces agreement in 1974, the Camp David Accords, and finally the liberation of Taba. Israeli forces had occupied the Sinai Peninsula during the 1967 war. The diplomatic and law battle started with senior diplomats, historians, and men of law. Following the Israeli withdrawal, the cities of Rafah in North Sinai and Sharm el-Sheikh in the south were also under the Egyptian control. It was not until March 1989 that Taba was fully restored to the Egyptian sovereignty. This was the last pocket of the Sinai Peninsula returned to Egypt after judges involved in international arbitration ruled in Egypt's favor in 1986. The 13-day negotiations produced two accords, including a framework for peace in the Middle East and another framework for the conclusion of peace treaty between Egypt and Israel. The latter was signed on March 26, 1979, paving the way for the first peace treaty between both sides. The Israeli withdrawal came following the signing of the Camp David peace treaty between Egypt and Israel in September 1978. Finally, former President Hosni Mubarak raised the Egyptian flag on Taba on March 19, 1989, declaring the return of the city to Egypt.
International law professor and former Minister of Parliamentary Councils and Legal Affairs, Dr. Mufid Shihab, said the anniversary of Taba liberation is very precious and that all Egyptians will remember such historic moments and should be aware of the lessons learned from victories and defeats over time. Shahab's remarks came during a televised interview with the Egyptian TV news sector and in line with Egypt's celebration of the 33rd anniversary for the liberation of Taba and hoisting of the Egyptian flag high over it.
فأصرينا على التحكيم وأنا أذكر وإحنا بنتفاوض وكان لي شرف أن أكون عضوا في الوفد في ذلك الوقت وإحنا بنتفاوض جم الإسرائيليين قالوا طيب طالما انكم مصرين على موقفكم احنا قررنا الانسحاب من المفاوضات. كنا في القاهره وطلعت الصحف انا اذكر الوفد الاسرائيلي ينسحب من التفاوض ويزعم ان مصر متعنته في موقفها. وخلاص اخطرونا ما عدتوش تيجوا المفاوضات انتهت. ولكن في ذلك الوقت كان شيمون بيريز رئيس وزراء جديد وكان راغب في ان هو يجي يزور مصر لان دي تديله يعني كرئيس وزراء جديد نوع من الدعم. فجاي يقابل رئيس جمهوريه مصر. فرئيس الجمهوريه قال انا لن اقبل وصوله الى القاهره وكان محدد للزياره انه يروح قصر 60 في اسكندريه يقابل الرئيس. قال مش هقابله الا اذا اعلن قبل ما يجي انه قبل التحكيم. وبالفعل نتيجه هذا الموقف الضاغط من جانب مصر اضطر ان هو يطلب من الوفد الاسرائيلي ان هو يلغي كلامه بان هو هينسحب ويعود الى يعني مائده المفاوضات. فطلعت الصحف ثاني يوم تقول الوفد الاسرائيلي يعود الى المفاوضات، ستستكمل المفاوضات بعد ان قبلت اسرائيل اللجوء الى التحكيم وستبدا مرحله للاتفاق على اعداد مشارطه التحكيم. فدخلنا في مرحله جديده بقى نتفاوض عشان نعمل اتفاق بعد ما قبلنا مبدا التحكيم. وفي هذا الاتفاق بقى بنحدد ايه هيئه التحكيم، ايه اجراءات التحكيم، ازاي تقدم المذكره، كل التفاصيل اللي هنمشي عليها. وبعد هذا استمر بقى الخلاف لغايه ما وصل للمحكمه ولغايه المحكمه والحمد لله حكمت بمصريه طابه في يوم تاريخي خالد لا يمكن لاي مصري واعتقد ولا عربي ان هو ينساه، في يوم يعني 29 سبتمبر سنه 88 قالت ان طابه مصريه ورأس النقب ايضا كلها مصريه.
Ladies and gentlemen, this was Dr. Mufid Shahabuddin, one of the negotiators and one of those behind the camera behind the return of Taba to Egypt. And he was speaking about his memories by then. Some special point, the Israeli delegation threatened just to withdraw from the negotiations. And it was Shimon Peres who claimed the responsibility of the Israeli premiership, and he wanted to visit Egypt. But the then President Hosni Mubarak decided that Shimon Peres is not going to come to Cairo except after announcing that the Israeli delegation are going to return back to the negotiating table and to continue with all the procedures. And this is exactly what happened. And after the negotiations, after returning back to international law, it was the great victory of the Egyptian negotiators. Among them was Dr. Mufid Shahabuddin, and Egypt's Taba returned back to the homeland, and we are now celebrating the 33rd anniversary of this very precious memory. Dr. Mufid also said that this moment is going to be a historic one. This day is going to be a historic one, and it's going to be remembered by all Egyptians with such pride. We are back with our land untouchable. Returning back to our Panorama news, and we are still with the political segment now, to Russian military, which said it used its latest hypersonic missile, Kinzhal.